If you prefer using Adobe Illustrator over Photoshop to create graphics for the web, you can make the original artwork in Illustrator and bring the results into Photoshop to add perhaps to a web page comp that you're building there. One way to get your artwork from Illustrator into Photoshop is to export it from Illustrator in Photoshop format. So for example, here I'm working in Illustrator CS4 with a native Illustrator file that has these objects on a white artboard. You can see that there are a number of layers and some layer groups. And as you can see, one of these layers is a layer of editable type. I'd like to retain the layers and the editability of the type layer when I bring this file into Photoshop. I'm going up to the File menu and I'm going to choose Export. I'm going to navigate to my desktop and then I'll go to the Format field and I'll make sure that Format is set to Photoshop PSD. And then I'll click Export. In this dialog box, I can set options for exporting in Photoshop format. First, I'll make sure that Color Model is set to RGB so that this file is in the proper color mode for the web. I'll set the resolution to the screen resolution of 72 ppi, and then I'll double check that Write Layers is selected in the Options area in order to preserve the editability of the type layer, so I'll make sure that Preserve Text Editability is checked. And I'll also check Maximum Editability so that Photoshop honors as much as possible about the layers in the Illustrator file. And I'll also check anti-alias so that when the artwork is converted to pixels, its edges remain as smooth as possible. When I'm done selecting the export options, I'll click OK, and then I'll go out to my desktop to see what I've exported from Illustrator. Here's my PSD or Photoshop document file. I'm going to open that in Photoshop. Here you can see the objects floating on a transparent background. And over in the Layers panel, I can see first of all that that text layer remains an editable type layer. If I wanted to change something about it here in Photoshop, I could just get the Type tool and click and drag over the type. And perhaps I'll change its color by going up to the Tool Options bar, clicking in the Color field, and choosing a different color. And then going to the Tool Options bar again and clicking the check mark to accept that change. I also see in the Layers panel that the layer groups, the Type layer group and the Artwork layer group, have been preserved. And if I expand the Artwork layer group, I see the groups and layers from the Illustrator file. So although Photoshop does have tools for creating graphic style content, if you prefer to make your graphics in Illustrator, you certainly can create them there and just export them in Photoshop format, as I've shown you here. Another way to go from Illustrator to Photoshop is to bring a smart object from Illustrator into Photoshop, and I'll show you how to do that in the next movie.